All right, strap in everybody because today we're going deep on bipolar disorder.
Ooh, exciting.
I know, right? You sent me, well, a whole university course on this.
I did.
I have so many notes.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Good.
So this is going to be a serious deep dive
It is.
to get everybody really understanding what bipolar disorder is all about
Absolutely.
beyond just the ups and downs.
Yeah, bipolar disorder, I mean, for a long time it was kind of in the shadow of depression.
Really?
And people thought it was less common. But actually, recent studies are suggesting that it might be way more common than we thought.
Huh. Why would that be? Why would people think it's less common?
I think it's because a lot of people are misdiagnosed initially with depression.
Oh, interesting.
So they haven't had a full manic episode. So they're just presenting with the depressive side.
Yeah.
And so they get that diagnosis first.
So it's like seeing half the picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're only seeing one side of the coin.
And assuming that that's all there is.
Yeah.
So then you mentioned, so there's like, so we're talking about the whole spectrum of bipolar disorder, right?
Yes.
And there's classifications like bipolar I and II.
Yes.
But then also, and I wasn't as familiar with these until reading this research, cyclothymia and bipolar NS.
Yeah.
So tell me, it's not just mood swings, is it?
No, it's definitely not just mood swings. It's way more nuanced than that. It's more than just, everybody has ups and downs.
Right.
This is very different. Bipolar I, for example, is I think what people think of when they think of bipolar disorder, where you have these very distinct episodes of mania.
Right.
And those last at least a week. And they can be so severe that the person needs to be hospitalized.
Yeah. I was reading about a study and it was talking about manic episodes and how some people during a manic episode, there's like this increased creativity.
Yes.
Like there's all this energy and it can go towards creative things.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Absolutely. But we should say that while it can be, have that upside, there's also a very serious downside.
Oh, absolutely.
Where, there can be impaired judgment, risky behaviors, and even psychotic symptoms.
For sure. Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword,
Yeah.
And then bipolar II, it has that similar kind of pattern.
Yeah.
But the upswings are a little less intense.
So those are like the hypomanic episodes, right?
Yes, exactly. Hypomanic episodes. So they might not, disrupt your daily life as severely.
Right.
And some people even experience like increased productivity.
Why?
But they can also be irritable and have poor judgment.
Yeah.
Which, can be hard for people around them.
Right.
And just like with bipolar I, then they'll shift into a period of major depression.
Okay, so that's interesting. So like you said, someone who maybe hasn't experienced the full manic episode yet.
Yes.
They might be misdiagnosed with depression for quite a while.
Absolutely. And that's where those other classifications can sometimes come in. So cyclothymia, for instance, is kind of a milder version, but it's chronic.
Okay.
So imagine shifting between hypomania and mild depression for at least 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So it's not as intense as bipolar I or II,
Right.
but it can still have a really big impact on your life.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting.
It can be?
And then I guess that's where the bipolar nest comes in.
Yes. The catch-all.
It doesn't quite fit in.
Yeah, that doesn't fit the mold exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe their symptoms don't last as long.
Okay.
Or they're not as severe.
Right.
But they're definitely having these experiences that are very outside the norm.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that even with that, it can impact their life and relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the spectrum. We've talked about all these different classifications.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to know, like, what does it actually feel like to go through these episodes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what's a depressive episode look like in someone with bipolar disorder?
You'll see a lot of the same things as in major depression. So, they're persistently sad.
Right.
They've lost interest in things that they used to enjoy. Their sleep is off.
Right.
Their appetite is off.
Okay.
And yeah, you can imagine just feeling like you're wading through mud.
Yeah.
You just don't have that energy or motivation to do the things that you usually love.
That sounds so draining.
It is.
But then there's the flip side.
Yes.
Mania.
Mania, yes.
What is that like?
So that's, kind of the opposite.
Okay.
You've got increased energy.
Okay.
You need less sleep.
Okay.
You've got racing thoughts. So it's like your brain's in overdrive.
Yeah, I remember reading in this research, it said that you can feel really euphoric.
Yes.
Really confident.
Yes.
Like you can do anything.
Absolutely.
But there's that potential, right?
There is, yeah. It can kind of take a darker turn.
Yeah.
So, we have to remember that in mania, there's that impaired judgment, risky behaviors, like going on spending sprees,
Right.
substance abuse,
Yeah.
potentially aggression.
Okay.
And in really extreme cases, there can even be like psychotic symptoms, like delusions of grandeur.
Wow. So it's like this intense energy, but it can be both exhilarating
Yes,
and incredibly dangerous.
exactly.
And this, we were talking about hypomania,
Right.
like the less intense.
Yeah, hypomania is like, mania is, I always say, like the less dramatic cousin.
Okay.
So you might be super productive,
I-
have all this creativity, but for some people it can also be irritability, poor judgment, which can strain relationships,
Yeah.
cause problems at work.
Okay.
So there are definitely downsides there.
Wow. What really stood out to me in this research was talking about mixed episodes,
Yes.
because it was describing them as like you can have features of both mania and depression at the same time.
Yes.
And I just can't, can you imagine that?
I know. It's really tough. It's a really difficult experience.
Yeah. Like feeling deeply depressed, but also having these racing thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So picture like being tearful,
Okay.
but your mind is going a mile a minute, or your mood is shifting really drastically throughout the day.
Oh, wow.
So it's not uncommon for people with bipolar to experience these mixed episodes,
Okay.
which, it just adds another layer of difficulty to an already really challenging condition.
Right. So we've talked about, the spectrum,
Yes.
all the different types of episodes.
Mm-hmm.
It's so clear this is more than just mood swings.
Absolutely.
But what causes this? Like, is there one answer?
I wish there was one easy answer, but it's very complex.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different pieces to this puzzle, but research really points to both biological factors and psychological factors being involved.
Okay, so let's start with biological.
Okay, let's start with biological. So family and twin studies show us that there is a really strong genetic component.
So if someone in my family have bipolar disorder, does that mean like I'm guaranteed to have it too?
Not necessarily, no. So the risk is higher if you have a first-degree relative, about 9% chance.
Okay.
But it's not a guarantee.
Okay.
But, it shows that there is a genetic influence.
Okay.
For example, identical twins who share 100% of their genes, they have a much higher chance of both having bipolar disorder than fraternal twins do.
Okay. So the genes are definitely a part of it,
They are.
but it's not the whole picture.
Right.
So what about the brain? Like what's actually going on chemically in the brain?
Well, that's where it gets complicated.
I figured.
So for decades, researchers have been studying these neurotransmitters in the brain, like norepinephrine and serotonin.
Okay.
And there's theories that like low levels of these neurotransmitters might be involved in depression, and then, excesses could contribute to mania.
So it's about balance.
Yeah. Think of it like that. It's a very delicate balance.
Yeah, like a seesaw.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about, well, speaking of balance, like things being in balance.
Yeah.
The research was mentioning like stress and how stress can actually be a trigger for manic episodes.
Yes.
And they were talking about how there was even a study where after a hurricane,
I remember that study, yes.
there was an increase in manic episodes
Yes.
in people with bipolar disorder.
Yeah. And I think it just shows how, powerful that connection is between our environment and our mental health.
Yeah.
And so stressful life events, especially if you have a history of bipolar disorder, they can be a big trigger.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then we also can't, childhood trauma.
Yes.
Can't overlook that.
No, that's a really important piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah.
Studies have shown that there's a correlation between experiencing trauma during childhood and developing bipolar disorder later in life.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it seems like, early adversity, it can really have a long-term impact.
Yeah.
And it can correlate with the illness starting earlier
Right.
and potentially having a more severe course. Wow. This is a lot to take in, but it's so important.
It is.
And I know people are wondering, okay, what can we do to help?
Yes.
So let's switch gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about, treatment options, what people can do to manage bipolar disorder and live full lives.
Well, the good news is there are really effective treatments.
Okay.
And, I think the key is really you need a long-term comprehensive approach.
Yeah.
And medication's usually a big part of that.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? What are the go-to meds?
Well, mood stabilizers are usually the first line of defense.
Okay.
And lithium's a really good example of a mood stabilizer that's been around for a while and has been really effective.
Right, lithium's like the classic, right?
It is.
But what if lithium doesn't work for someone?
Well, there are others. So valproic acid, it's also known as Depakote.
Okay.
That's another one. And lamotrigine or Lamictal, that one's become more and more popular.
Okay, so there's options.
There are, yes. And then sometimes doctors will also add in these atypical antipsychotics,
Oh, okay.
especially if the mania is really severe or there are psychotic symptoms.
Okay. So there's a whole, range of medications.
Yes.
But medication is just one piece of the puzzle, right?
It is, absolutely. Therapy is a really important part of this, too.
Okay.
And I think it's important to remember that therapy isn't just, talking it out.
Yeah.
There are actually really specific therapies that are tailored for bipolar disorder.
So give me some examples. What kind of therapies?
So CBT,
Okay.
cognitive behavioral therapy, that
Yeah.
can be really helpful.
Got so.
It helps people to identify and then change those thought patterns and behaviors that contribute to mood episodes.
So it's like equipping them with the tools
Yes,
to
exactly.
manage their condition.
Exactly.
Okay. And are there other therapies that are used for bipolar disorder?
There are. So family-focused therapy.
Okay.
And that actually involves the person's loved ones in the treatment.
Gotcha.
So it helps, families understand the complexities of bipolar disorder and
Right.
helps them build a support system.
Yeah.
And then there's another one called interpersonal and social rhythm therapy,
Okay.
ISRT. And that one focuses on the importance of stable routines and relationships,
Okay.
because what they found is that disruptions in those areas can actually increase the risk of episodes.
So like keeping a rhythm,
Yes, a healthy rhythm.
but a healthy rhythm to your life can help manage the ups and downs.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
And then, of course, psychoeducation,
Right.
which is basically learning all about the illness
Right.
and how to manage it.
Okay.
So those are, some of the key therapies that can be really helpful.
So we've got medication, therapy, psychoeducation. It sounds like a very holistic approach is key.
It is. It really is. You need all those pieces working together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what does the prognosis look like? If, like, for someone who has bipolar disorder, I mean, is there hope for a full recovery?
Well, with the right treatment and support, a lot of people with bipolar disorder can live really fulfilling lives.
Okay.
And, a big part of that is, finding the right medications,
Right.
really understanding the illness,
Yeah.
having a support system in place.
Yeah.
All of those things can make a big difference in how well someone does.
Yeah. I remember reading a study that said that like 50% of people who are hospitalized
Oh, wow.
for either mania or a mixed episode achieved recovery within 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
It's really encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it just highlights the importance of getting help
Right.
and then really sticking with the treatment plan.
Okay, so there's definitely hope,
Oh, absolutely.
but wow, we've covered so much in just this first part of our deep dive.
We have a lot more to talk about.
I know. What else have you got for me?
Oh, so much more. Welcome back. It's great to be continuing this conversation. We were just talking about treatment and prognosis, and I think one thing that's important to highlight is, a good outcome often really depends on an accurate diagnosis.
Oh, for sure.
But getting to that diagnosis can sometimes be tricky.
That's like detective work, right?
It is.
Especially when you consider that, bipolar disorder shares some symptoms with other conditions.
Exactly.
Like anxiety,
Yeah.
ADHD,
Mm.
even borderline personality disorder. How do you, tease all that apart?
Yeah, that's a great point. That overlap of symptoms makes it so important to do a really thorough assessment.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that, many people with bipolar disorder, especially bipolar 2, they might actually be diagnosed with unipolar depression at first,
Right.
especially if they haven't had that full manic episode yet.
Right. Right. So, where do you even begin? If you're trying to, do a thorough assessment for bipolar disorder, what does that look like?
Well, I think the most important thing is really listening to the person, really getting a detailed history from them.
Okay.
Asking about family history, past experiences, really understanding their whole story. It's about connecting the dots
Yeah.
between their symptoms and how those symptoms are impacting their life. And also, what are the potential triggers that kind of set off those episodes?
Yeah. And this research mentioned something called a life chart,
Oh, yes.
which I thought was super interesting. It's basically like a visual timeline
It is.
that helps track, when the episodes happen, how long they last, what were the potential triggers. I thought that was such a cool tool.
Yeah, it can be a really powerful tool because it helps to paint a clearer picture of what's going on
Right.
and identify patterns that might not be obvious just from talking to someone.
Okay, so, it's not just about, confirming, okay, this is bipolar disorder.
Right.
It's also about ruling out other things that could be going on.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It's a process of elimination, but it's also a process of bringing all the information together to really get that full picture.
Right. I bet having a good relationship with your doctor is crucial in all of this.
Oh, it's essential. Open communication. That feeling of trust between the doctor and the patient is so important.
Right.
The individual needs to feel safe,
Right.
comfortable sharing their experiences, even the really tough stuff.
Right.
And without feeling judged.
Absolutely.
And, we have to remember it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
The person with bipolar disorder, they're the expert on their own life. And then the healthcare professional, they bring their expertise to the table in terms of, diagnosis and treatment options.
So it's a real partnership.
It is.
Working together to figure things out.
Absolutely.
And I bet that relationship becomes even more important when we're talking about managing bipolar disorder long term.
Yes,
We
Doug.
talked about medication and therapy earlier. But, I have to admit, the idea of, like, taking medication for a mental health condition
Yeah.
can be kind of intimidating for some people.
I can understand that.
Isn't it?
There's definitely sometimes hesitation, concerns,
Right.
and those are valid concerns.
Yeah.
What's important is to have that open, honest conversation with your doctor. Talk about those concerns. Really understand what are the potential benefits, what are the risks, what are the side effects of the medication,
Right.
and, come up with a plan that feels right for you.
So it's very personalized.
It is.
There's no, like, one size fits all.
Exactly.
But then, what about the challenge of actually sticking with a treatment plan over time?
Yeah.
Because, bipolar disorder, it's about these shifts, right?
Yes.
In mood and energy.
Yeah,
So it seems like it would be really hard to stay consistent.
it can be. That's one of the trickiest parts about managing bipolar disorder. When someone's in a manic phase
Yeah.
or hypomanic phase, they might feel so good,
Right.
right? That they think, oh, I don't need this medication anymore.
Right. Like the illness itself is almost working against the treatment.
It is. It absolutely is. And then, some of the medications have side effects,
Right.
which can be hard to deal with.
Right.
And so, some people might feel like, ugh, the side effects outweigh the benefits,
Yeah.
and they might stop taking the meds altogether.
Right.
And so, again, that's where that communication with your doctor is so important. Don't suffer in silence.
Yeah.
If you're having side effects, talk to your doctor. They can adjust the dosage. They might be able to find a different medication that works better for you.
So it's an ongoing process
It is.
of like checking in,
Yeah.
making adjustments as needed.
Yeah, you have to be flexible.
And what about therapy? I imagine consistency there is just as important.
Absolutely. Therapy provides that safe space.
Yeah.
That supportive space to process emotions, develop coping skills and build resilience.
Right.
It's like giving people this toolbox full of strategies to help them navigate the ups and downs.
I like that. A toolbox
Yeah.
full of strategies.
Yeah.
And, you can't forget about like support systems
Oh, absolutely.
beyond the therapy office.
Yeah, family, friends, support groups. Having people who understand what you're going through can make such a huge difference.
It's like you've got your own team
You do.
in your corner
Yeah.
to help you through the tough times.
It's such an important resource because those supportive relationships can really foster a sense of belonging, understanding, encouragement. It can help people feel less alone
For sure.
and more empowered to really manage their condition.
Yeah. It's a reminder that you don't have to go through it alone.
You don't.
And that sense of community, it can even extend beyond
Yeah.
like our immediate circles.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like raising awareness about bipolar disorder, reducing stigma
Yeah.
so that as a society, we're more understanding and supportive.
That's so important. Stigma can be a huge barrier for people
Right.
to reaching out for help and even feeling comfortable talking about what they're going through.
For sure.
So the more we can normalize these conversations,
Yeah.
the more we'll create a world where people feel safe and supported to, actually reach out for help when they need it.
It's about breaking down those walls, right?
It is.
Of silence and shame. Because, mental health is health.
It is.
And it deserves just as much care and attention as our physical health.
Absolutely.
Speaking of care, what about self-care? What does that look like for someone with bipolar disorder?
Well, self-care is all about, doing those things that nourish our well-being.
Right.
Getting enough sleep, eating nutritious foods, moving our bodies, spending time in nature, engaging in hobbies that we enjoy, finding ways to manage stress, all the things that help us to feel good and function at our best.
It sounds simple enough,
It does.
but I imagine it's easier said than done.
It can be, yeah.
Okay.
Especially if you're in the middle of a mood episode.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important to be proactive.
Yeah, hey.
Have a self-care plan in place.
Okay.
Think of it as, again, like a toolbox.
I like the toolbox analogy.
Yeah.
It's coming back.
It is. It is. But it's a toolbox full of all those things, all those coping mechanisms
Okay.
that you can use when you need them. So maybe it's taking a warm bath, or listening to calming music, or practicing mindfulness, or reaching out to a supportive friend. The key is to have those tools ready.
Right.
And use them regularly.
Yeah.
Don't wait until you're feeling completely overwhelmed.
As we're talking about all this, I'm thinking about how far we've come in understanding bipolar disorder.
We have.
Just even in the last few decades, there was so much stigma
Oh, so much.
and misinformation around mental illness.
Yeah.
It's really incredible to see how much progress has been made.
It is,
Yeah.
The research is constantly evolving, the treatments are getting better, and, the conversation around mental health is really opening up in a positive way.
Yeah.
And I think we're really moving away from that place of fear and judgment
Yeah.
towards a place of empathy and understanding.
Exactly. And that's so powerful because it's recognizing that recovery is possible.
It is.
Living a fulfilling life with bipolar disorder, it's not just a dream.
Yeah.
It's a reality for so many people who have access to the right resources and support.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the amazing resilience of the human spirit.
Yes.
That ability to adapt and to cope and to find meaning, even in the face of adversity.
It's incredible.
It's truly inspiring.
It really speaks to the power of hope.
It does.
Right. Hope that things can get better. Hope that recovery is possible.
Absolutely.
Hope that we can continue to make progress in understanding and treating this condition.
Yes, absolutely.
So with that note of hope, should we shift gears a little bit
I think so.
and talk about some of the latest research, some of the breakthroughs that are happening in the field?
I'm ready when you are.
All right, so we're back and ready to kind of wrap up our deep dive into bipolar disorder.
I gotta say, after learning all this stuff, all this research, I'm feeling cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
We've talked about the different ways bipolar can look, the challenges with getting a diagnosis and finding the right treatment, how important it is to have good support. It's been a lot.
It really has. And I think that cautious optimism, that's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Because we've come a long way, but there's still so much that we don't know.
Right.
And that's what makes it so fascinating.
Exactly. Okay, so speaking of, new things, you mentioned earlier that there's all this new research
Oh, yeah.
happening right now. What's got you really excited?
Well, one thing that I think is really cool is the research using brain imaging
Oh, yeah.
to look at mood regulation.
Oh, yeah.
So scientists are using these really advanced techniques like fMRI.
To actually watch brain activity happening in real time.
Wow.
And it's giving us all these incredible insights into how the brain works.
That's so cool. So we're actually getting to see what's happening in the brain
Yeah.
during these mood episodes.
Yes.
So what have they found? What are some of the big discoveries?
Well, one of the most interesting things is that they found that in people with bipolar disorder, certain areas of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex,
Okay.
which is involved in planning and decision-making, they're showing different activity patterns.
So is it like those areas aren't communicating properly?
Yeah. Yeah, think of it like the brain's orchestra is kind of out of tune.
Okay.
Different sections are playing at the wrong tempo or volume.
Wow. That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So, but these brain imaging studies, they're not just helping us understand what's going on in the brain, right?
Right.
They're actually helping us come up with new treatments too.
They are. Because the more we understand about how specific areas of the brain are affected, the better we can design treatments that actually target those areas.
Okay.
It's much more targeted than the approaches that we've been using.
So it's like personalized medicine,
Exactly.
but for mental health.
Yeah. Tailoring the treatment to the person's individual brain patterns.
That's amazing.
And it's not just about medication.
Right.
These brain imaging studies are also informing the development of new therapies, too.
Like what?
Well, for example, neurofeedback,
Oh, yeah.
which involves training people to actually regulate their own brain activity. There's growing evidence that that can be really helpful.
So you're training your brain to heal itself.
In a way, yes.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is, and I think it really highlights that there's no one right answer
Yeah.
for how to treat bipolar disorder.
Right. And that's where, again, that relationship with your doctor
So important.
to figure out what works best for you.
Yes, you need that open communication, that trust, and be willing to try different things.
And it's not just on the doctor.
No.
It's on the person with bipolar disorder too, right?
Absolutely.
To really advocate for themselves.
Yes, educate yourself about the illness. Find those resources and that support to help you manage it effectively.
It's about owning your journey.
It is.
And speaking of, like, owning your story,
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of breaking down the stigma
Absolutely.
around mental illness.
The more people feel comfortable sharing their experiences, the more we can challenge those stereotypes and misconceptions.
It's about making it okay to talk about it
It is.
openly and honestly.
Yes,
I mean,
without the shame or judgment.
exactly. And it's not just individual stories. It's about, like, as a society, creating a world where mental well-being is a priority,
Yes,
where people can get good care,
absolutely.
and where we're all supporting each other.
Yes,
So it's creating a world where everyone feels safe and empowered.
to get help.
Yeah, that's the world we want to live in.
That's what I want.
We too. And remember, there's hope. Recovery is possible.
Yes.
And with research and advocacy and support, we can create a much brighter future for those living with bipolar disorder.
Wow. What an amazing deep dive this has been.
It has.
I feel like we really explored bipolar disorder from every
I
angle.
covered a lot of ground.
We did.
And I hope our listeners are feeling more informed and empowered.
Me too.
Whether it's for themselves or for a loved one, or even if they just wanted to learn more about this condition that is often really misunderstood.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
It is.
The more we understand about mental health, the better we can support ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities. So thank you so much.